So being pagan kind of sucks sometimes, and I know that I'm not alone in this because earlier this week I asked you guys to share on my community board what aspects of paganism you struggle with, and you guys really enjoyed sharing some of the things that bother you about this path or some of the things that you feel has been holding you back. So that's what we're going to go over today. I'm going to be sharing with you a few of the common issues that you guys expressed in your own pagan journeys and hopefully provide a little advice as well. We'll see how that goes. I can see Lily Bell has chosen to join us today. And actually, before we get into those pagan struggles, I actually have a sponsor for today's video. So let me jump into our sponsor segment. I want to give a big thank you to Keen for sponsoring this video today. And we have Valentine's Day, or Lupercalia for us pagans, coming around the corner. And I know a lot of people love to get a tarot reading, some type of reading around this time of year for a bit of extra guidance into their love life. And Keen is pretty cool because they actually provide access to a lot of different vetted tarot readers and astrologers. Their readers are available 24/7, so there's always someone available online. And it's pretty easy to schedule a call with a reader as well. For new customers, you can do your first 10-minute reading for $199. In general, prices are based on which advisor you choose, and the services are backed with a satisfaction guarantee. And let me give you a couple quick tips for getting the most out of your reading. Asking open-end questions can be a lot better than asking simple yes or no questions. So think of questions starting with a how or a why. For example, you might ask, what do I need to do in order to be in a relationship within the next 6 months? Versus the question, will I be in a relationship in the next 6 months? Ask about yourself. Ask about your decisions, your actions, your mindset. These are things you actually have the power to influence and change in your life. And finally, don't fear if you get some bad news during your reading. Readings are kind of like a snapshot of your life where it is at the moment, and you always have the ability to change things in the future. So if you have any questions about your love life this Valentine's Day, be sure to get those 10 minutes with a reader for $199. And you can click the link down below in my description box. It's trykeen.com/scarlet. Now back to the video. So I divided your struggles into 4 major themes that I noticed in your posts. And the first theme has to do with not being able to practice openly. I got a lot of messages like being with someone stuck on Christianity and too close-minded to realize the way, or a fear of judgment and persecution from others. Here's another one. For me, it's practicing openly in my apartment, which I share with my sister who isn't pagan, and I feel doesn't understand. They are accepting, but I still feel I have to hide what I do. They think it's strange and often laugh when I try to add things for the specific holidays and seasons around the house. I feel so self-conscious and anxious about it all, and I feel that it's affecting my connection with the gods, as well as I'm unable to offer them as much as I would like to, and I feel a bit lost. So this feeling, I think, is pretty universal to a lot of pagans. I got so many more messages along the similar vein where you guys were expressing your frustrations that you couldn't just be pagan and proud and open with all of your beliefs, with all of the things you wanted to decorate with your altars, with your offerings. And that's definitely something I really struggled with too as well, especially when I was starting out as a teenager. When I first discovered paganism, I was so afraid people would laugh at me, would think I was weird. And while my parents weren't super Christian, I also just didn't want them to see what I was doing. So I had to kind of hide my altar space and hide my books and the little things that I would pick up for my pagan practice. Now, in terms of advice for this, take everything I say with a grain of salt because I'm just one person and what I think might not work for everyone. But I will say that it really does get easier both the older you get and the longer you've been in this practice. When you're younger and if you're living with your parents or maybe you have a bunch of roommates right now, it's very tricky because, putting a bunch of pagan stuff around your space, your house, might raise some eyebrows and might lead to some awkward conversations. When you get older and you have probably a little bit more space where you can express yourself, obviously that does get easier. And I think also the times are changing too. It's become a lot easier in general to practice paganism because every year more and more people are learning about this path, learning about what it's really about, and are kind of joining the movement. So the stigma around paganism has been decreasing with, I think, every year. It was a lot different just 10, 20 years ago. So I do think the days of feeling like a loser because you're pagan are hopefully far behind us now. Now, that advice probably doesn't help if you're currently dealing with a situation where you are feeling uncomfortable practicing in your own home. And one thing I would mention is that paganism isn't about the stuff. I know there is a lot of materiality around paganism, especially with how it's viewed and experienced online. But paganism is a set of beliefs and ideas. You don't necessarily need a huge altar setup or a bunch of decorations. You don't need talismans. You don't need to dress a certain way. So if you are really concerned about how people are viewing you, you don't really have to do paganism with all the trappings. You can do paganism in your own way by just believing in, your thoughts, your ideas, whatever you believe about the world. If you have a connection to the natural world, if you find that divinity existing within nature, then hey, you're a pagan. You don't need all that extra stuff. That extra stuff is just kind of icing on the cake. And finally, it kind of helps to think about what these people are really reacting to. So if you are living with Christians, for example, that are looking down on your practice, ask yourself why that is. It's most likely because they have an incorrect or misguided view on what paganism is. And yes, you might consider trying to educate them, but a lot of people aren't going to change. And in a way, you can just accept that, hey, that's what they're about, that's what they believe, and, I could do my best, but ultimately, they're going to have their beliefs, and I'm going to have my beliefs, and we're just going to have to kind of agree to disagree. It's not easy to be in a relationship with someone who might have those feelings or even live in the same house as someone that has those feelings. But, life is difficult sometimes. And luckily, us pagans, I think we're pretty strong people and we can get through almost anything. So the second big theme of struggles that you guys have is with being consistent in your pagan practice. I got quite a few messages like this. My struggle is finding the time to invest. I have 2 young children and a very demanding job. My biggest struggle is being consistent with a daily pagan and witchcraft practice. I know that I love how I feel after practicing, but the business of life can make it hard to even remember every day. For me, it's finding time to have a daily practice. It's something that's important to me, and I want to create a daily morning and evening practice, but as a mother to 3 young children, it's a struggle. So it really seems like a lot of you guys feel a lot of pressure to be practicing every day. And I don't think you need to put that much pressure on yourself. I think your pagan path can ebb and flow with time. For me, I've had very long stretches where I really didn't connect with my paganism at all. For example, in college, I just didn't really think about paganism. I really wasn't really a pagan during those 4 years, and I picked it back up when I had more time and interest. So it's okay if things do ebb and flow. Also, we pagans kind of follow cycles, right? We're really into the cycle of the moon, the wheel of the year, things like that. So you might find yourself more connected with your pagan practice during one stage of the cycle than the other. For example, maybe the full moon is when you feel really driven to do a ritual or a spell or something like that. Or maybe it's the time around Samhain that you feel most inspired to practice your pagan beliefs. And that's okay. There is a time and a place for activity and a time and a place for rest. Also, if you're feeling kind of in a rut or just not inspired to work on your pagan path, it's totally fine to just understand that, hey, I'm a pagan because of my beliefs and my ideas. The doing stuff, the rituals, the offerings, things like that, that's not necessary to be considering yourself as a pagan. Paganism to me is kind of like a faith, a religion. So if you have that belief system, if you believe in the divinity of the natural world, then that's good enough and that's okay. And you'll pick things up more when you have more time in the future or the next time you feel inspired. So don't beat yourself up if you're not leaving offerings all the time or celebrating all of the pagan holidays. It's okay to slow down a bit. That's only natural. The next big struggle you guys wrote about was a lack of instruction on how to be pagan or a lack of sources you could turn to. I got comments like, I struggle with not finding enough info about my beliefs or not knowing where to find it. For example, here's another one. For me, it's worship of lesser known deities. It's almost impossible to reconstruct a pagan practice with very little resources. Here's another one. Filtering out all the misinformation and pseudoscience and pseudohistory can be exhausting. Or figuring out what path/tradition I fall into, and or if I have to create my own. And also figuring out what deities, energies, spirits I want to work with. Yeah, so it seems like a lot of you guys are still stuck on trying to find your pagan path. And then once you do figure that out, if you figure that out, then deciding what resources do I turn to for instruction on how do I actually go about this? And this is a big struggle with paganism, though I will say that we are living in the information age. And in some respects, it has never been a better time to be a pagan. When I was growing up, I didn't have the internet really at home when I was starting out. I was mostly using a collection of a few books I could find in bookstores. And nowadays, you have endless amount of information to turn to, which is great and wonderful. But it can also feel very overwhelming when you have so much information out there and so many options and choices on what direction to take. When I was starting out, I pretty much only knew about Wicca. I wasn't aware that there were even other branches of paganism. So that's the branch that I started with. And I did find a lot of comfort in the fact that it was kind of regimented with specific traditions for specific times of the moon cycle, for specific days on the wheel of the year, and I really liked that structure when I was starting out. So I would say that really is one of the biggest benefits of a system like Wicca. And it is a bit trickier when you're wanting to start out with something like Celtic paganism or Hellenic paganism, where the sources might be a bit more difficult to fully understand and figure out how you can incorporate that information into your own practice. It especially gets really difficult when you're looking at Celtic and Norse paganism because so little actually survives that we as modern pagans kind of have to construct our own versions on what we think their paganism might have been like. So there's always going to be an element of reconstruction here. We're never going to be able to fully turn back the clock and practice as our ancient ancestors did. But there's a lot of things about ancient paganism we probably wouldn't want to bring to the modern age anyway, and is probably best left in the past. So you do have to be a bit comfortable with the idea that you are creating your own spirituality, which is a bit strange for many of us who grew up in such a regimented world dominated by monotheism. So that does take time to get used to, and it's a process. Also, in terms of sources and finding reputable sources, there is a whole lot of misinformation out there. Plenty of people have gotten book deals and written about stuff that they just don't really know what they're talking about. And sometimes I find it's best to not look at, quote, pagan books or witchy books, but instead go to the primary source documents. So if you're studying Celtic paganism, you're a bit out of luck because there isn't too much actually from the Celts, but we do have some secondhand accounts you can look at. You have a lot more information to work with if you are studying Greco-Roman paganism, because we have plenty of written material about how they practiced, along with Cometicism or ancient Egyptian paganism. There's a decent amount of information there. So actually looking towards history books and figuring out how they actually practiced, what were some of the actual rituals they did, and thinking through, hey, how could I do a modern version of that? So that's kind of the direction I try to go in. There is, of course, plenty of wonderful pagan and witchy books out there, but you just got to take things with a grain of salt and try and figure out what sources those authors were using for writing their books. That can be helpful. And of course, there's unlimited information online. And again, you just have to be careful. Take everything with a grain of salt, including all of my videos. Because if you watch some of my earlier videos, when I was just starting YouTube, I'm sure I got some misinformation there. And I apologize if I do. But we are all learning, we are all growing, and it's just part of the process. And the last theme I uncovered when looking through your comments was struggling with not being able to find other pagans. I got messages like, I struggle getting in touch with other pagans and other witches. Also, this comment, for me, it's finding other pagans to practice with. I'm solitary and enjoy it, but it would be great to have pagan friends to bounce ideas around with. So that's something that I personally struggle with too. And first off, I'd like to say that it's totally okay to be a solitary pagan. And in fact, it can be really beneficial to be solitary, especially when you are starting out with your practice. Because when you are starting out and you're reading different books, you're trying to figure out which path resonates with you the most. And that's inherently a personal decision. So if right off the bat you're meeting and connecting with fellow pagans, their own paths might inspire or even dictate what path you end up going down towards. So I do think it can be great to start off as solitary so you get a good sense of what you personally resonate with. Whether that's a pantheon of deities, whether that's a type of witchcraft like green witchcraft or kitchen witchcraft, whatever it might be, you will know best what path suits you. But of course, you may not want to stay solitary forever. And the good news is that there are more and more pagans every year. This is a growing community. So I do think it will be easier to find and connect with pagans as the years progress. And of course, there are plenty of online and in-person ways to connect with fellow pagans right now. Online, there are, of course, forums and Facebook groups and Reddit threads and things like that. I also have a exclusive Discord community that I run for my patrons. I'll link that down below in case you are interested in joining. And then for in-person stuff, there are a lot of New Age shops, crystal shops, witchy shops. So there's probably one maybe in your area if you're lucky. And if so, those shops often do events. And I found that going to those events is really the best way to connect with fellow pagans and witches. So I highly recommend checking that out as well. So thanks for watching my video today. If you did like it, please sure to hit that like button and consider subscribing. And definitely leave me a comment down below if you have a particular pagan struggle you would like to share. And I'll see you guys next week. Bye.